Ruger Mark II. Here we go. These are really cool. This is my favorite 22 pistol, really, altogether. They're super reliable, super accurate. They're durable, well made, and inexpensive. Any decent shop ought to have one in their inventory somewhere, and they're usually only about as much as $300 usually, especially if you get one of these older ones that may have some scars on it, thrown around a little bit. A lot of times when you find them, they're a bit worse for wear in some cases. So like today I saw a Mark I, and that was actually kind of in the $250 range. Had a few marks on it, but not bad. So where the Mark I and II kind of differ, I'll get into that a little bit, but when these things came out in the 50s, they beat out a lot of prices. Even the Duramatic, the high standard Duramatic, they beat out that. By the design of how Ruger designed these things and put them together. The frame is two halves put together, gassed together, and then there you have it. So that kind of cut down on the machining process and all that. The trigger guard is a separate piece they put in. The upper here is a hollow tube that they threaded and put the barrel assembly on, and then you got the bolt. And really that's not much other to it other than the internals, obviously. They got the old school heel release there. They got popularity because they look like a Luger, and they kind of had a name that rhymes with that a little bit. So the Mark II, they added the bolt hold open and release. So on the last shot, the bolt will hold open and you have the bolt release. That's where the Mark II kind of outshines the Mark I. But if you like the nostalgia like I do, you might be considering picking up a Mark I for that reason, but it does not have that feature, bear in mind. The Mark III has a magazine disconnect, which is not a lot of people's favorite, and myself included, because of the way it takes down. They have different models of these. There's all kinds of different accessories and everything. They have one that's called a 2245, which the lower is usually polymer, and they have the same angle and grip look as a 1911, but I tend to like the old school standard model here. That's all steel, and it's got that really cool look to it, and especially with the shorter barrel like this and the taper. So the Mark IV, they answered the problem to the takedown, because obviously it was quite a issue. So the Mark IV just has a button and the whole thing lifts up and you can take them apart, and it's really easy, because that is the biggest downfall of this pistol, is the takedown. The takedown absolutely is wretched. So anyway, here we go with the takedown. We're going to do it. We're clear. That's one thing. You want to make sure you're clear. Now, you can almost take these things down with almost nothing, but you'll do a little bit better with a couple of extra things, and I'll show you. This particular gun has a little quirky thing to it about taking it down, which I'll show you. It seems to be particular on this particular one, but I don't know. If you ever have one that hangs up like that, you'll know how to fix it. Okay, so we're going to drop the bolt. Now we're going to snap the trigger out, and because if you know, it is a rimfire, so you got a couple options. You can put an empty case in there and then do it that way, or what I do is I pull the bolt back just ever so slightly and then snap it out. Hopefully that really kind of helps move that firing pin away from the chamber just a little bit. That's what an old Smith taught me, so I've been kind of doing that. Of course, you can just throw an empty shell in there. Alright, next step is to remove the mainspring housing, which is by this latch. A lot of people just stick a screwdriver in there. I tend to stay away from metal on metal, so I just took a pen apart and I just shoved the end of the pen in there and pulled it down. Now normally that would protrude the mainspring housing, but on this particular one it doesn't seem to do that. I don't know if it's just quirky. So I'll go ahead and move these aside here so they don't roll off the table. I take a wooden dowel and just put it right up against there and just give it a little love tap. And that usually frees up the mainspring housing on this particular one. I don't know why it's like that, but it doesn't seem to bother me. Alright, here we go. Now you just take this and just wrench it down. Now I'll take out that assembly, and then underneath here you'll see the hammer is up in there, and I'll show you the hammer. A little piece of the pen that I took apart. Alright, there's the hammer and the strut. Sometimes that strut can get hung up underneath the pin right here, this cross pin, so you gotta be careful of that. because it will do it to you. And now we're going to pull the trigger and slide the bolt right on out. And why I pull the trigger is it helps get that hammer out of the way. You can see now the hammer is completely dropped out of the way. To do the bolt assembly, you can take out here's your main spring or recoil spring right here. Recoil spring rather. Okay, and then now we're going to just push this little pin on the side. And of course, I don't take everything down to the last pin here, and this is just a basic field stripping cleaning. Take your firing pin out and this little retaining firing pin spring in here. If we can lift that out of there. Now this can break on you, and if you get a hold of Ruger, they'll usually fix you up with these. And that's about as far as the bolt assembly goes that I will go. I'm not going to take apart that or anything like that. So, alright, move that aside. That is pretty much your cleaning maintenance for the bolt right there. Now, this, you can take it apart by, of course, make sure that hammer's down. Now, I take a non-marring hammer like this. Now, I still, just to protect it, I still take like a piece of paper towel or strip of leather, something like that I may have around. I put it right over the muzzle like this and go ahead and give it a couple of taps. Oh, actually, I'm going the wrong way. I'm sorry. From the rear, you go ahead and give it a couple of taps. Now here is not so bad. Give it a couple of taps there and your assembly will come off. So it has been a while since I disassembled this, so I had a little backwards there. But anyway, also if you find that this is a little sloppy in the saddle, I've seen it where you can actually put this in a vise and squeeze it just a little bit, and it'll tighten the things up a little. But there you have access to kind of clean up all inside there and whatnot. There's your ejector. And if your ejector ever comes a little too loose or whatnot, that's going to be a slight problem. You might need to take it to a gunsmith and get it, because it's pinned in there, and that's where it needs to ride. I personally put a little grease up in here in the lockup area, and you don't need to do that if you don't want to, but I do it for the ease of taking it apart. So now you have a little bit of access. You don't even really need to take it this far. You can take some brake cleaner from the automotive section of any kind of Walmart or whatnot and blast it out of there and then hose it back down. Alright, now to put it back in, you just you can see where it rides right there on that square and putting it right there. And then this is where I had it backwards. Go ahead and put the rag or whatnot right over the muzzle, and then I just go ahead and tap that back on. Even though it does have a protection over the rifling and everything, and I'm using a non-marring hammer, I still like to protect it a little bit. Now you'll see you got it correct, because you'll see it protruding in the back, and then you'll look straight down and make sure that you got everything lined up so that the main pin can go through, and you can double check it by sticking it through. Okay. Alright. We'll go ahead and put the bolt back together. Little spring with the hook, and it kind of lives right in here. You'll see down in the track, and there's a cutout right there. Right there is the little cutout, and this is going to live like this, facing down, right in there. Take your firing pin and slide it up in there. Take your pin and put it back in. There you go. Clean up your bolt face and all that. Alright, now we can put this back in. And always make sure that you have your that off, and sometimes on your if you have a 2245, make sure your bolt release is down. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put the mainspring back on. You'll see it's pretty explanatory. You got a half moon shape. The flat end goes down first, and then you just kind of line these back up here. And there it is. Make sure your hammer is out of the way. Slide this back in there. Okay. Now, here's where the tricky part is, and you got to be very careful. Okay. Looking up in there, you're going to see the hammer and the strut. I'm going to pull the trigger, and of course if you have the magazine disconnect, you know you're going to have to put the magazine back in and pull the trigger and all that. Push the hammer up out of the way. Make sure it's all the way up there. You can use a little, you know, like a little pen like I've got right there, or you can do a little shake and jiggle and all that. Okay, now that it's out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and insert the mainspring back in there with the pin. Okay, and it did. It went locked in there. Now, this is important. That strut, if you can see it, that strut right there has to line up and go in to the mainspring here. You have to do this. It's very important. If not, it'll jam up on you and you are going to be in trouble, because if you don't get it in there and you override this and snap everything down, you may not be able to get this pistol back apart. So you can see it right there. It's out of the way, and I'm going to turn it up and I can see it, and it'll capture right into there. Snap that down, and you can see it works fine. Go ahead and check it here. There it goes. And that's how you put these things back together and take them apart. They are involved. It takes patience, it takes understanding of the steps and all that. So they definitely have their weird little issues and all that. Of course, it's not my favorite, but there you have it. That's how they work. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it helps you. Sorry it's so long, but you know, just wanted to at least do a little bit of entertainment, a little bit as it is. Hopefully you got something out of it. Anyway, thanks for watching.